Blake Lively, once seen as untouchable, now finds herself trapped in a storm of courtroom battles, secret witnesses, shocking allegations, and fading alliances, while Justin Baldoni holds evidence that could shift everything. The question is not only what she has done, but how far she will go to keep the truth hidden. The lights of Hollywood never dim for long, but behind the glamour of premieres, the sparkle of diamond gowns, and the carefully curated smiles, there exists a much darker narrative, unfolding one that allegedly threatens reputations, fortunes, and friendships at the highest levels of celebrity power. And in the eye of this storm stands Blake Lively, whose carefully cultivated image of elegance, motherhood, and Hollywood royalty is reportedly being tested in ways that few could have anticipated. Allegations, court filings, and whispers from inside the industry suggest that this battle is no longer confined to private chambers, but is spilling into the court of public opinion. And every move, every document, every revelation seems to ripple far beyond the walls of a courtroom, and into the hearts and minds of millions who watch from afar, wondering if what they believed about their stars was ever real to begin with. Party. One of this story begins with what many are calling the most shocking development. So far, the emergence of a mystery witness, a figure hidden in shadows, a voice that has not yet fully spoken, but whose presence is already shaping the conversation, and allegedly influencing the strategies of some of Hollywood's most powerful attorneys. Reports claim that this witness provided a declaration, a formal document that recounts experiences which, according to insiders, were not directly connected to the filming of It Ends With Us, but rather linked to earlier encounters with Justin Baldoni. And this raises more questions than answers. Why would testimony that allegedly stems from a different set or a different time suddenly appear now, at the height of this courtroom storm? What is its real weight? And more importantly, why is Blake Lively's team fighting so aggressively to keep the identity of this person sealed from public view? Legal analysts suggest that what we are witnessing is more than just procedure. It is strategy. Some argue that Blake's attorneys are attempting to leverage this declaration as a symbolic weapon, a piece of narrative that paints Justin in a certain light. Regardless of whether the specifics tie directly to the allegations at hand, supporters of Baldoni counter that this is nothing more than a distraction, an attempt to stir headlines and sway opinion by invoking the presence of a faceless accuser. But here lies the tension, because within the redactions of that declaration, the blacked-out words, and the carefully concealed details, there may exist a truth that could either reinforce or unravel Blake's carefully positioned claims. Attorneys familiar with high-profile cases explain that when a redacted version is filed, it is almost always accompanied by an unredacted version privately delivered to the opposing counsel, meaning Baldoni's team may already know exactly who this person is and what they have said, yet the public remains in the dark, left only to speculate. And speculation is precisely what fuels Hollywood scandals like this. It creates an atmosphere where rumors take root, where narratives are shaped not by verdicts, but by perception. And that perception can be just as powerful as any ruling. Observers note the irony in Blake's current stance, because critics recall how her own legal team allegedly fought to unmask anonymous creators who spoke against her during earlier stages of this dispute. Some of those individuals were reportedly threatened with exposure, yet now when it suits her position, the actress appears determined to keep her own witness veiled in secrecy. Does this reveal a double standard, or is it simply a reflection of how complex and tactical these legal games can become? One could argue that both sides are playing with fire. Justin accused of misconduct, Blake accused of manipulation, both attempting to manage the optics as much as the evidence. Every time a new document emerges, it is less about facts and more about who controls the narrative. So what exactly does this declaration claim? Sources who have reportedly seen portions suggest that it speaks of negative interactions with Baldoni described as verbal abuse and unprofessional conduct. Yet, as one legal commentator pointed out, being called unpleasant or difficult on a set is a far cry from the far more serious allegations that underpin this case. If that is the extent of the declaration, its power may lie less in legal weight and more in emotional resonance, an attempt to paint a broader picture of character. But then why keep the witness hidden? Why insist on layers of redaction unless there is something more at stake? Perhaps this person fears retaliation. Perhaps they are still employed within the industry. Perhaps their career could be jeopardized if their identity was revealed. Or perhaps, as some skeptics argue, the vagueness itself is the weapon, a way to create unease without accountability. This dance of concealment and revelation is one of the most fascinating elements of high-stakes Hollywood litigation. It is never just about what is said, it is about how it is presented when it is revealed and who gets to frame the story first. For Blake, this witness represents both opportunity and risk opportunity, because it allows her team to suggest that there are others who share her perspective that Justin's alleged behavior is not isolated risk, because if the court decides that the redaction cannot stand, the identity will be revealed, and the defense will have the chance to fully dismantle the credibility of the declarant. At this stage, audiences are left to wonder, is Blake truly protecting a vulnerable insider from exposure, or is she carefully orchestrating a narrative shielded by legal technicalities? The truth may lie somewhere in between, and as with so many celebrity scandals, perception often becomes reality. We must also consider the psychological dimension, because Hollywood is not only a battlefield of contracts and scripts. It is a theater of identity. Blake has long been admired for her poise, her family life, her position alongside Ryan Reynolds in the pantheon of power couples. But in this legal fight, those very elements that once shielded her from criticism are now being scrutinized. Is she leveraging her influence to tilt the scales, or is she a woman fighting desperately to be heard against forces determined to silence her? Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni's camp maintains a quieter posture, at least publicly refraining from inflaming headlines with counter-declarations. But insiders whisper that his attorneys are confident that when the curtain is lifted, the substance of these claims will prove flimsy, perhaps even irrelevant to the accusations that truly matter. In this case, this silence, however, is not without risk in the court of public opinion. Silence is often interpreted as guilt hesitation, or fear, yet seasoned strategists know that sometimes the most powerful move is patience, allowing your opponent to overplay their hand. And so the stage is set, Blake armed with a mystery witness, cloaked in secrecy, Justin waiting for the right moment to respond, and the public caught between fascination and fatigue, unsure of what is true, but unable to look away. The deeper we move into this saga, the clearer it becomes that this is not just about one allegation or one declaration. It is about power, narrative, and control in an industry where image is everything, and where a single perception can define a career for years to come. As we peel back the layers of this first act, we are forced to confront difficult questions. Do celebrities receive special treatment in the legal system? Does the glare of fame distort the balance of justice? And are we as audiences complicit by consuming the spectacle with such hunger? Part 1 leaves us with no answers, only shadows and whispers, a mystery. Witness a redacted declaration and a star whose reputation now hangs in delicate balance as lawyers maneuver behind the scenes and journalists dissect every fragment of leaked information. What happens next may define not only the outcome of this case, but the legacy of those at its center. The story takes another turn when the name Taylor Swift suddenly echoes across this already chaotic courtroom stage, and it is in this moment that the drama shifts from being a dispute between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni to something much larger and more unpredictable, because once you bring Taylor Swift into any narrative, the spotlight multiplies tenfold and the stakes instantly rise. But how exactly did Taylor become entangled in this legal storm, sources claim? It began with whispers of messages, communications that may have existed between Taylor and Blake, reportedly tied to conversations around the broader controversies surrounding this case. Rumors suggest that Blake's legal team, or perhaps her opponents, believed those communications could shed light on key moments in the timeline. Yet what followed has been described by analysts as a series of strategic missteps that may end up hurting the very side that sought Taylor's involvement in the first place. The timeline is crucial here. Reportedly, Taylor Swift only became aware of her potential role in this saga mere days before she was expected to respond to a deposition request. According to her representatives, she had not been given proper notice and, more importantly, she had not agreed to be deposed. Her legal team quickly pointed out that while she is willing to comply with the law, she also has obligations, commitments, and a global schedule that cannot be adjusted on a whim. For anyone who understands the mechanics of depositions, especially in cases of this scale, the request to involve a figure like Taylor Swift was always going to be fraught with difficulty. Judges do not easily compel megastars to appear without overwhelming evidence of relevance and necessity. Yet here we are watching as legal teams debate timelines, argue over documents, and speculate about whether Taylor's testimony could change the direction of the case. Judge Lyman reportedly rejected requests for delays, citing that the parties had already been granted ample time and opportunity to conduct discovery in plain language. That meant the window for depositions was closing fast, and Taylor would not be forced to step in at the last moment. This was seen by many observers as a major setback for those who had counted on her voice adding weight to their claims. But let us pause and ask the deeper question: why Taylor? Why did anyone believe that her words could shift this trial in such a dramatic way? Was it because of her close friendship with Blake Lively? Was it because of rumors that she had witnessed private conversations or exchanges? Was it perhaps because messages existed between them that could either reinforce or dismantle the timeline that Blake had presented? In Hollywood, perception is often more valuable than fact, and the mere suggestion that Taylor Swift could be called to speak was enough to electrify headlines across tabloid social media and late-night conversations. Fans speculated whether the superstar would support her friend without hesitation, or whether she would distance herself to avoid becoming collateral damage in a battle that has nothing to do with her artistry. And therein lies the emotional weight. For Taylor Swift, who has spent years carefully curating her brand as a champion for independence for women's voices, for resilience against the harshness of both the industry and the media, to suddenly find her name pulled into a legal fight, where reputations are being questioned, is not just inconvenient, it is potentially damaging. Imagine for a moment what the calculations might look like behind the scenes. Taylor's team reviewing the subpoena, her lawyers drafting responses, her managers weighing the optics of involvement. Does supporting her friend publicly open the door to criticism? Does refusing or limiting her role create tension with Blake? Does silence itself become a statement in a world where every word and every absence of a word is dissected by millions? Observers also noted how this maneuver may have backfired against Blake's legal strategy, because while she managed to bring Taylor's name into the orbit of this case, she may have underestimated the judge's firm stance on deadlines and relevance by waiting too long, by not providing convincing justification. The attempt to involve Taylor seemed more like a publicity play than a legal necessity, and that is precisely the kind of tactic that risks irritating a judge. And irritation is no small matter in high-profile trials. Judges are not swayed by celebrity, but they are sensitive to fairness, efficiency, and respect for process when attorneys push boundaries or appear to manipulate optics. The bench often responds with less patience in subsequent rulings, and that can tilt the scales in unexpected ways. So what do we make of this moment? Blake Lively's camp reportedly wanted Taylor Swift's name tied to their narrative, but the outcome has instead cast doubt on their timing and tactics. Justin Baldoni's side likely sees this as a victory, not because Taylor's words would have been devastating, but because denying that opportunity reinforces the perception that Blake's team is scrambling rather than strategizing, and yet the unanswered question lingers. What about the texts? Rumors suggest that the court has deemed certain messages relevant, possibly including exchanges between Blake and Taylor if those records exist and are already in the possession of attorneys. Then whether or not Taylor herself speaks may not matter. The content could still surface at trial, shifting narratives in subtle or explosive ways. The tension builds because here, we are watching one of the most famous artists in the world dragged by association into a battle she never asked for. What if those texts contain casual remarks suddenly interpreted as evidence? What if private friendship becomes public strategy? What if loyalty collides with reputation? How much can a global superstar risk in the name of friendship? This entire subplot illustrates the unpredictable nature of celebrity scandals. They are not linear. They spiral outward, pulling in new names, expanding the circle of drama until the story becomes less about the original conflict and more about the constellation of people caught in its gravity. In this case, Taylor Swift is that gravitational pull, the one name that guarantees mass attention even if her role remains peripheral. Legal experts caution that while Taylor is unlikely to testify before trial, the possibility of her appearing during proceedings cannot be ruled out entirely. Under certain circumstances, a witness may still be called to the stand in the midst of trial if the court deems it relevant. And imagine the spectacle if that were to happen: the courtroom flooded with cameras, the internet exploding with speculation, the entire case reframed through the lens of Taylor Swift's words. But for now, what we are left with is a picture of miscalculation. Blake's legal team seemingly overestimating their ability to maneuver Taylor into this process, underestimating the rigidity of deadlines, and perhaps revealing too much about their own reliance on star power to sway perception rather than evidence to win the day. It raises a haunting question: Does this indicate desperation? Are we watching a strategy that is beginning to fray at the edges, or is this simply one more chess move in a game where every piece matters and even a failed motion can serve to distract, delay, or pressure the other side? As part 2 unfolds, we see not just the mechanics of law, but the drama of relationships, friendship, loyalty, and the unbearable pressure of fame converging in a single narrative. A superstar drawn into shadows, a legal team scrambling against time, and 2 central figures whose fates may ultimately hinge not on truth alone, but on perception, timing, and the willingness of others to stand by them. And so as the Taylor Swift chapter leaves us with more questions than answers, we move toward the next Act 1, where new attorneys join the fray, where strategies sharpen, and where the question of who truly holds power begins to crystallize. But before we reach that point, we must acknowledge what Part 2 has revealed. This is no longer just Blake versus Justin. This is a narrative that touches on one of the most powerful voices in the world. And even if Taylor never utters a word, the echo of her name will resonate through this case until its very end. The tension in Hollywood only escalated as whispers turned into confrontations, and the silence between Blake Lively and those closest to her became deafening sources, confirmed that the stakes were higher than ever with Justin Baldoni positioned. As both adversary and witness to the unraveling drama surrounding the actress, every statement became a thread in a web that threatened to choke her reputation. The evidence mounting behind closed doors suggested that the lines between truth manipulation and desperation were blurring fast, leaving audiences gasping for answers in an industry where secrets often define careers. The leaks spilling into the public eye hinted at conversations too damaging to ignore. Conversations that exposed not only questionable choices, but also the deliberate moves of someone trying to protect her empire, yet struggling to maintain control. Observers noticed the strain in her public appearances, the calculated smiles, the carefully chosen words, and the sudden absences from high-profile events, each disappearance raising new questions about what she was hiding behind that curtain of silence as rumors swirled. It became clear that the battle was no longer confined to legal walls. It was bleeding into friendships, alliances, and even family ties. Those who once stood firmly by her side were now stepping back, uncertain whether their loyalty could withstand the storm that had engulfed her. Justin Baldoni, by contrast, seemed almost emboldened by the unfolding chaos. His responses, crafted with precision, carried the weight of someone who knew more than he let on. Someone aware that the truth, when it surfaced, would cut deeper than any legal blow could deliver. His calm demeanor against the backdrop of swirling allegations painted him as both strategic and relentless, a figure who refused to be silenced, while insiders hinted at the existence of a witness whose testimony could shatter everything Blake had worked for. The identity of this mystery figure remained hidden, sparking late-night debates among fans and fueling media outlets desperate for the next twist. Each article and expose only added fuel to the fire, presenting new angles of betrayal, greed, and desperation. The longer Blake delayed, the greater the perception that she was cornered, her silence interpreted not as strength, but as surrender. Hollywood is a stage where silence speaks louder than words, and her refusal to directly confront the allegations created the illusion that she had already lost the war behind the cameras. Lawyers orchestrated a meticulous battle strategy, their every move designed to protect assets, defend her image, and prevent the release of evidence too devastating to recover from. But no legal strategy can fully contain a story when the public eye is watching, dissecting and questioning every detail. The more she fought behind closed doors, the more her secrets spilled into the open corridors of entertainment gossip. With Taylor Swift's name unexpectedly drawn into the conversation, tensions skyrocketed. Fans demanded answers about whether Blake had indeed tried to suppress her closest friend's voice, and whether that move alone would fracture one of Hollywood's most celebrated friendships. The possibility of betrayal at that level turned speculation into obsession, as millions awaited even the slightest confirmation or denial. Each silence, each carefully timed photo or interview became a clue in a puzzle that no one could solve, yet the suspense grew thicker by the hour. Blake Lively's case was no longer just about legal ramifications. It had become a cultural reckoning, forcing fans and critics alike to question how far someone would go to preserve their carefully constructed image, and whether even the most glamorous star could survive the crushing weight of truth. In the end, the whirlwind surrounding Blake Lively has become more than a courtroom dispute. It has evolved into a mirror reflecting the fragility of power, fame, and carefully crafted images. What began as whispers has grown into a roar, shaking the foundation of Hollywood alliances and testing the loyalty of friendships thought unbreakable. Every move she makes is scrutinized, every silence analyzed, and every attempt to conceal only deepens the shadows around her story. The presence of a secret witness, the persistent pursuit by Justin Baldoni, and the silence from those once closest to her have all combined to create an atmosphere of unbearable suspense. The public watches not only for answers, but also for the unraveling of a narrative that has dominated headlines. Her once flawless reputation now feels fragile and uncertain, a reminder that in the world of stardom, the higher the pedestal, the harder the fall yet. Within this chaos lies a lesson about control and truth. No matter how fiercely someone tries to bury a story, the truth has a way of rising. The legal battle may stretch on, motions will be filed, testimonies will be taken, and strategies will be played like a game of high-stakes chess. But the one question that lingers in the air is simple. What happens when the image shatters, when the audience sees not the polished star on a red carpet, but the human being behind the facade? For Blake, this may be the defining chapter of her career and perhaps of her legacy. Whether she emerges victorious or defeated, the world will remember this moment, not for the glamour but for the shadows it revealed. And as the countdown to the next hearing ticks on, one thing remains certain: the story is far from over.